Okay, so Germany is kicking ass. Germany is the economic powerhouse in Europe, and the economic powerhouse of Europe, it has actually kept Europe afloat. So the austerity measures, Greece was about to go bankrupt, but because of Germany being an economic powerhouse, they were able to save Greece. And so I came across this article actually right here, and it says why Germany has it so much better than the United States. Germany has somehow managed to create a high wage, unionized economy without shipping all of its jobs abroad. So it's unionized. They actually care about the working people. There's no unions here. In America, they are driving people into virtual wage slavery. There is no solidarity. There is no unity. And even though Americans, there was three. Robert Reich had wrote an article, and he had actually identified three ways that Americans were tightening their belts up and were making things work out. One was they were working longer hours. The other one is women are starting to get out into the workplace, but it's not for opportunity's sake, but it's to make ends meet. So you have working longer hours, you have the women were working, and then people were borrowing more money. Okay, and so that's just, it's unsustainable. It's absolutely, the American people have been pushed beyond the brink. They're working all the hours. The women are working. They're borrowing more money than what they're actually making. So that is not sustainable. There is going to be a crisis. So Germany has it so much better than the United States. So the European Union, 27 member nations with a half a billion people, become the largest, wealthiest trading bloc in the world, partly producing nearly a third of the world's economy. So the European Union itself, the New York Times has been running articles saying that Europe is going to collapse. Europe is going to collapse. They have lots of social democracies in Europe. They have in France, for instance, they'll have a babysitter that comes to your house if you're a mother that has children, so you could go get a job. So they have more of it's a social democracy. They have a better social safety net. And since Germany is the biggest economic powerhouse of the European Union, here we see that the European Union has become the largest, wealthiest trading bloc in the world, nearly as large as the United States and China combined. Europe has more Fortune 500 companies than either US, China, or Japan. So before, if you take the European Union out of the equation, you actually see that the United States produces the most GDP. And then China and Japan isn't that far away. Japan is absolutely phenomenal. Japan is not a tiny island. I mean, it's actually a large island. But compared to the United States and China, the fact that Japan is able to compete, they are able to do more per square mile than the United States, than Americans are able to do. And individually, the European countries aren't producing as much as the United States, China, and Japan. But when you combine them, because the United States is 50 states, so it's 50 smaller nations. When you combine Europe in the same sense, when you have the same economic bloc, then you actually see that they are producing more than both the United States and China combined. Okay, so the United States isn't number one anymore. The European Union is exporting more stuff, and actually that's the way that economists judge whether or not a country is doing well. That's the only way that they judge how good a country is doing, is by their GDP, by how much, the gross domestic product, by how much stuff they produce. So I don't particularly like that, but that's what economists say makes money. When you produce a bunch of stuff, you can sell that stuff. You make money when you make that stuff. So the more stuff you can produce, the better your economy is. Now, I'm going to start this off with the things that I think of when I think about Germany is the solar panels. Okay, they have more solar panel per person in Germany than every other nation. Solar panels, they're utilizing the energy of the sun. That's where all energy comes from, even coal, oil, you know, all those dinosaurs and all that plant matter that was underneath the Earth's crust. That was all produced by sunlight. So the sun is producing all the energy, and it's also a renewable energy, and it's going to be around for millions of years. So it makes no sense not to be utilizing that. There's also wind power, and there's other ways, you know, free renewable power. Instead, you know, we're exporting, we're exporting, you know, coal here in Kentucky, but it's also not going to the Kentucky people. There's a few people that's employed in the coal mines and that's employed at the coal plants. But the CEO, like Kentucky Utilities, is owned by Pennsylvania Power and Light, which is actually owned by Germany. There's a German company that owns, it's called Eon.us, and it owns Pennsylvania Power and Light, which is the big umbrella parent company, and then Pennsylvania Power and Light, PPL, owns so-called Kentucky Utilities. So even our own, you know, the biggest thing that Mitch and Allison was talking about, we don't even get ourselves. We don't even get that ourselves. We don't get Kentucky's coal. And they say it's better for our electricity. I just got a $350 electric bill in the mail. Okay, so you want to sit there and tell me that it's actually helping the Kentucky people by giving Germany? Germany has taken all these profits. How are they able to buy our energy company? Why are they able to, you know, take the profits away from us? And that's what's supposed to help the Kentucky people? I don't think it does. I don't think it helps Kentucky people whatsoever. So and we're not utilizing other forms of energy. There's no solar panels in Kentucky, nowhere, anywhere. I don't see solar panels in anybody's houses. In fact, that was Ronald Reagan who basically just fucked this country up, and there were so many fucking ways. He attacked the middle class just to make the rich and poor, and that's the point. That's the point, to stretch the Americans beyond the brink, so that way they are disposable. They are expendable. You go to work, and if you say, hey, I want some better conditions, get on out of here. So they want them to be expendable, to be able to be, you know, units of labor that they can move around and say, you do this or else. So that's the point. They want to make us into wage slaves. They don't want us to unionize. They don't want us to have a better life. So solar panels is a big thing that I think about with Germany. Here's a UK and Germany break solar power records. 7.8% of UK's electricity comes from solar power. I was hoping to see something about UK there, but anyways, that's it's a headline. So Germany, they break solar power records. The other thing I think about with Germany, there's they have a great healthcare system, right? Their healthcare system is amazing, and I'm not even connected to the internet. I don't even know how that ad popped up. That's amazing. That's amazing too. To be honest with you, it seems like some companies have it very efficient, right? Make a web page, put in your credit card number, and get your money. That should be, everybody should have like a type of web page like that. I saw a laundromat actually just right up the road, and there's nobody that runs it except for whatever electricity it takes. But it's you just come in, you put the money in the thing, you get your stuff washed, you walk away. It's just sitting there making money. So that's amazing. So the last week, Lower Saxony made itself the final state in Germany to do away with any public university tuition whatsoever. So that's another big thing, is that they have free college. And hold on, I'm going to tell you something even crazier than that. The other two things that I was thinking about with Germany is NyQuil. A lot of the Germans sit there and say that NyQuil is their nighttime nurse. So NyQuil is actually, that's one of the biggest remedies for any of my health issues that I have. Before, when I didn't have health insurance, that was my health insurance, NyQuil. And so, they recognize that. So there's solar power, there's healthcare, there's NyQuil, and there's free college. Free college. They just did this where it's free not only for their own students, but for every international student as well. So an American, if you want to get a free education, go to Germany and you will get a free education. You don't get a free education here. Here, if even if you want to become a teacher, even if you want to better yourself, the fact that we don't invest in our own people, the fact there is no social democracy here is just ridiculous. Mexico has virtually free college. So when they try to raise the fees up just a little bit, they had been out in the streets protesting. So in America, there's actually a European country that they want new teachers and talented teachers to be in the school systems, just like Norway, just like Sweden. They don't have that here. So we're not actually promoting, good teaching skills. What we are promoting is more of an aristocratic culture. Who do you know? Who don't you know? And then you're just being Nazi fascist. You don't even have to be a good teacher. The teachers that were going to become teachers that I had seen in class, they basically were stupid. They weren't inquisitive. They didn't think about anything. They questioned nothing. And so if all they're going to do is just force down the students' throats the same crap that they taught just because, they're getting paid for it. They're going to get some money for it. But the students, they just have to do it just because. I don't think that's that's not effective. That's not a good tactic. We need talented teachers, smart teachers. And we need to, loosen our belts up a little bit, so to speak, and learn how to share power and have democratic processes in our schools. So that way people are saying, instead of just shut up, do what you're told, you actually empower people and share that power. But there's lots of things that we need. We need talented teachers. That's the most important. That's Barack Obama, the most important indication when it comes to a child's success is how good the teacher is. So to have a charismatic, a smart teacher, these are good things, but that is not what we're looking at. Instead, it's a lot of insecure, fascist Nazis who only care about classroom management. They're not actually teaching. They're forcing people to do and listen to what they're saying, even if it doesn't help them. Even if they say, "Hey, I got a question. Shut up. I don't care about your question. Just, eat the crap that I shove in your mouth and like it." So those are the biggest things that I think of when it comes to Germany. There's a ton of things that Germany is doing right, and compared to America, it's we need to become more like Germany. Another big thing is home ownership. In Germany, a lot of people own their own homes. It's been passed down from generation to generation. So when you own your own home, then you have a bigger incentive to go out and go work because you got a place to keep your stuff. You got a safe place to keep your stuff, so you have a reason to go out and work. And since everybody has their own home, there's less crime, less breaking into places. So when you own your own home, that's an incentive to go out there and be the best you can be. So Germany, to do away with any public university tuition whatsoever, they're going to actually make, they said, you might be thinking, isn't just Wunderbar for the damn Germans. This is Rebecca Schumann. She actually has a lot of German words in there, and that's great. Wunderbar is wonderful. But they even spell America right here with a K, right? So you want a real higher education bargain, kids, get your kids to learn German and then pack them off to Vaderland. Of course, while it's both uplifting and something else to see our Teutonic friends put so much public investment into higher education, we do the opposite. They're actually sitting there. They care about their future. They care about their future. So if you want to be competitive in the world, you got to get better, brighter, more talented people out into the workforce. We do the opposite here. We don't give a crap if you're talented and smart. Just as long as you're obedient and don't say a damn word, you will pass. You will move on to you will move on to the next level. So our Teutonic friends put so much public investment into higher educations when we do just the opposite. There are important reasons that German universities have been either inexpensive or free for their entire existence. The German university experience isn't worse than the American one. There are vital cultural and infrastructural differences between our systems that bargain-hungry students and their parents might want to consider before bidding off Wiederschielen to the big state U. So they're just sitting there saying there's going to be differences with the colleges because Germany slims their own belt instead of having these big, lavish, student halls and these recreational places. Instead of having those types of things, it's just books and libraries and classrooms, and that's it. So, Sweden, Norway, the Scandinavian countries are doing education very well. They rate high on the democracy scales and freedom. Denmark is the happiest country in the world. So the fact, and also their prisons, they don't have prison systems. They have like theme parks, right? They have like, their idea is you treat people the way they're supposed to be treated, and that's how you rehabilitate them. So we're still operating on, in 1800 type of standards, even though we're living in the postmodern internet generation. The German university experience isn't worse than the American one, but there are vital cultural and infrastructural differences between our systems that bargain hungry students, right? And so that's the big difference there, is that their universities are about learning and it's about education. So, and also you need to know German if you're going to go work there. But there are sort of international studies group that are taught in English. But that's amazing. That's incredible. We can't get free college here in Kentucky, but we can get free college if a Kentuckian was to go to Germany. You get free college. So while this has been, for me, a very enticing offer, I want to go to Germany, right? I've been wanting to go to Germany for a while, learn some German, and get some of this free college. And I bet you, actually, they will recognize my talents and efforts and elevate me, whereas they do not do that here, since it's not about education. It's not about learning. There's a lack of solidarity. They don't really care. It's compulsory so-called education, so it's not helping anybody. They're beating their kids, telling them to go do that, and at no point, are they actually advising and strengthening their lot in life. How easy would it be to teach solidarity in the classroom, right? You can make them get into groups, you could have cooperative projects, and you could do a lot of better things to where they could be friends, building networks, and then those networks will help them get jobs later on down the road. And then also the stuff that's coming out of their mouths should be able to help you, but that's not helping either. So why is the German economy surging? They protect domestic manufacturing with high barriers to imports. They encourage labor unions. Okay? So they want the working class people to do well. They want everybody to do well. Here we have a social caste system. We got homeless on the streets. We got poor people. The middle class is waning. Bernie Sanders is railing against the attack on the middle class. We care more about the financial industry than we do about manufacturing. So they want to have derivatives, and they want to be able to short sell people. They want the banks to be able to buy up all their houses and then to sell them dirt cheap. That's what they want to do. And that's ridiculous, because how are we supposed to compete in the world if we're outsourcing all of our jobs and the rest of the world is manufacturing our stuff? So either A, we have to evolve and become better and bigger than whatever it is that we're trying to do, or we need to do what Germany's doing, protect domestic manufacturing, high barriers to imports, and encourage labor unions. Throw off the walls, make ourselves as strong as possible, and then, proceed forward that way. So that way we're actually protecting our own, we're making our own stuff, and our people are getting money. Kentucky is the poorest state in the nation, and it just got bought out by the richest senator. The poorest state in the nation just voted for the richest senator. That's how fucked up America is. Topsy-turvy land. It's upside down. And none of this makes any sense, and nobody seems to care. They just keep on going farther and farther to a corporatist mentality. We're all cheap labor, and there's no unions here. There's no union protections. There's no solidarity amongst the people. It's more or less just a cutthroat, dog-eat-dog capitalistic society. Some swim, some sink. And if you sink, sorry about your luck. Goodbye. Good riddance. So in fact, nearly the entire German auto industry is unionized, allowing the nation to produce twice as many cars as the United States, while at the same time paying their workers more than $60 on average and still making healthy profits. $60. $60 an hour? $60 an hour? Holy crap. We're not even coming close to $60. We just, $7 an hour. We're working for peanuts here. And that's accepted. That's okay. How are people are being nickel and dimed and they're not making it. So the German government has recession-proof programs like the short week that pays businesses to cut back on the hours of workers rather than lay them off. during economic downturns. So instead of just saying fire everybody, they have short weeks. So they pay the businesses and says, keep the people employed so that way they still have work and they still have jobs, if there's a type of recession. In America, no such safety net. There's a downturn in the recession, people get fired. Get on out of here, people get fired. Germany's constitution gives the labor force a say in everything from pay to working conditions in the factories they work for. So we do need a new constitution in Kentucky, maybe America too, but they have unions and working class people actually have a say-so in the constitution. And so there's lots of things that we need to be able to do. Germany is a powerhouse. In fact, I almost feel like that by doing what Germany is doing, that's a conservative model. That is a model that is working. That is a strong model. It's a strong model that helps people. So the Republicans think that it's laissez-faire, every man for himself, who gives a fuck, whereas the Democrats say that if you get the poor and working class people more money, then they will be able to make the rich people even more. And that's absolutely true. By giving the poor and working class more money, that makes a more robust economy. People are exchanging dollars for services and getting more things done. That creates a more robust economy, and that's how you make more money for everybody. Everybody, the poor, the middle class are making more money, and when they're making more money, the rich make more money. So both of the political parties is a business class party. Both of them care about what the corporations want. And just one of them says that if the poor have more money, the rich will get more money. And the other one says, fuck it, every man for himself. Let the rich buy up whatever they can buy up and produce whatever they can produce, and fuck the people. So they having a condition to give the labor force a say-so in the economy is a very genius idea. Focusing on manufacturing and waning back the financial industry. Like people get into just exchanging money and currencies and short selling and the stock market, and they're kicking ass and making a ton of money, right? Fuck the American people. Let's just get into the financial industry, screw as many people as we can. We make money, they lose out, and I just don't. It's just not sustainable. The American people are already on the brink anyways. A recent report out of Brussels says that Germany's economy is prospering, and that's a big problem for the rest of the Eurozone. Our Planet Money team reports on how doing extremely well can cause trouble when you're a member of the group. Germany's economy is having a pretty good year so far. Manufacturing is high, unemployment is low. The economy is expanding, and yet the strangest report has recently come out of Europe. It says all that success is actually a problem for the rest of the Eurozone. Zoe Chase of our Planet Money team wondered why Germany's success isn't considered a good thing. Germany's got a thing about making stuff the world wants. Says they have an export fetish. So before GDP, that's how you know if you're a good economy, because you're exporting stuff. Germany is exporting stuff. They got an export fetish. So they want to sell stuff. They want to produce, and they want to export as much as they can. So they've been very focused on exporting as much as possible. And, that's the Chicago boys. That's what they did in Chile, right? No socialism, no communism. It's just going to be a capitalistic-driven market. And a capitalistic-driven market, it's not no government. You need some government, right? Milton Friedman, he said at least we need court systems in order to keep the peace and to, work out differences between the companies. So it's not no government, but just a slim government. And they want the government to sell out off their assets. The government owns a lot of assets, actually. Even Boone County has golf courses and public parks and that's just one county out of 120. So are all the counties, acquiring property in Kentucky? Kentucky has the biggest corruption rate. So that means there's more people that's actually losing money. People talk about tax dollars, right? The Republicans talk a lot about taxes. Well, you want to save taxes. Well, let's stop just, with the corruption. The corruption allows for lots of, higher taxes, because we're paying taxes, and it's going for people for, building bridges to nowhere, for corrupt people. They're getting, paid, what, $30 for pencils and stuff like that. So that's a problem. There's every time an audit comes out in any part of the state, it's always some bad news for somebody. Nobody's finances are correct. They get that check from Frankfurt and they spend it however they want to spend it, and there's no checks and balances. So they said when you have an incredible export growth, money pours into the country, and ideally when a country makes a bunch of money, they want to spend a bunch of money, right? That's a good, robust economy, and that's how you're going to make more money. So that was the whole idea of the European Union. The money easily flows from one country to another. Say you're an Italian winemaker, and you come with their cars, they fill the truck of wine, something like that. So they're actually saying that Germans aren't going to Italy and buying wines. They're actually exporting more than they're importing. So rather than running a big deficit like other European unions, Germany has a trade surplus, a huge one. Jacob Kierkegaard says no developed country in the history of the world has ever been so successful and so frugal at the same time. So they're tightening up their belts, they're conservative, they're sitting there, making as much money as they can, and they're being successful. They got a strong social safety net. They have a universal health care system. They have labor unions. In fact, this comparative government, just comparing the different governments and the different societies, I think is very intelligent. It's like actually what Kentucky, the social studies is supposed to be doing, teaching democracy. Every one of the standards in social studies is about learning democracy. Every single one of them. So Kierkegaard, it's fair to say that if consumers everywhere behave like the German consumer, then the world would be in almost a permanent recession. That's why Germans got in trouble with the European Commission. They recently put out a report saying Germans, you're not drinking enough Italian wine or eating enough Spanish figs. Basically, you're not buying enough stuff. Your trade surplus is above allowable limits. So they're exporting too much, right? Hey, Germany, stop exporting so much stuff. Start buying some stuff. And so one reason this kind of imbalance happens because there are different cultures around money that have come together to share the euro. So it's a kind of the attitude of the German people. You're cool if you buy into something for a reasonable price. It's a national mentality. You bought something and you had a deal. That's a good thing. The national mentality of Germany it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So I know this sounds like a stereotype, the penny pinching German, but talk to a German. He says, I wouldn't pay too much for a bottle of wine, actually. And that's Philip Plickert, the economics editor at the German newspaper, the FAZ. My budget for a bottle of wine would be 6 or 7 euros. That's okay. That's reasonable. I'm afraid that Italian wine won't save Italy. They have to produce something else. Oh, Italy, you got told by a German. That does happen in the EU, the European Union these days, and the German household savings rate it is really high. Germans are not splurging. But there's a deeper systematic issue in the European Union beyond culture that explains the surplus, the shared currency itself. If Germany still had its own money, the old Deutschmark, it would have been really hard to build up a surplus like this. If people want to buy German stuff, they'd have to use marks. The more popular German stuff got, the more valuable the mark would get. Their currency would be really strong, and that would have corrected the problem. German products get more expensive, exports slow down, and inside Germany, the strong mark makes things like Italian wine seem super cheap. So Gianluca, the winemaker, says, in fact, it was easier to sell his wines back before the euro, back when Italy was using the lira. So wine, that's what, raising grapes. We have land here. We can do everything that any successful country in the world is doing. And that's what we should do. Kentucky, we should take all the best ideas of the world and apply them here. So Germany is a good example of what to do. France, the UK, China, Japan, Brazil. There's a lot of emerging markets that's coming out here. And we're not, our students aren't passing the test. They're not doing well. And that's because we don't have talented, educated folks. And we also don't have this solidarity, this national type of solidarity where we care about each other and the working class and labor. We don't care about labor. We care about working hard. So we care about, being enslaved ourselves, but we don't care about maximizing as much as we can. I actually remember going to a job here, the timber mill company, and if you don't allow me to think like a corporation, how to make more money, how to make it more efficient, then I'm going to start thinking like a union. And I even talked to some of the people about unionizing and getting better wages. They were not down for it. I tried to talk like a corporation. They weren't down for it. They didn't want either one. They just wanted me to be a slave. Shut up, slave. Go do your job, slave. I'm the boss around here, slave. And the boss he was a racist piece of shit that just went around starting trouble. That's all he done. So it's much easier to export all over the world. So yes, from my point of view, it was easier with liras than with the euros when it comes to the wine. But today, Italy and Germany are both on the euro. So exchange rates between the two countries did not automatically adjust to even things out. German cars seem like a deal. Italian wine looks expensive. The Germans keep racking up the surpluses and the Italians rack up the deficits. It's hard to solve this problem. Nobody wants Germany to produce fewer cars, but it's also hard to make individual Germans change their behavior. Here's Plickert, the German newspaper editor. How should you order people to spend their money? I mean, it's a free country and this is a free economy. I mean, we don't have a kind of commissioner who orders people to spend or to save. It's millions of individuals who make their individual decisions. Theoretically, if Germany makes no changes and the surplus gets worse, they'll have to pay a fine to the European Commission, money that should be put into a bailout fund for Eurozone countries. So that's Germany's economy's kicking ass, right? Here's another thing about Germany's economy kicking ass. Such success does not bring universal admiration. Germany is hated in parts of Europe for demanding growth-crushing austerity as a price for supporting the euro. Hey, let's keep the euro and cut all the social spending back. Germany has social spending. It's a social democracy. They have universal health care. They got free universal health care. They have free college. We don't have anything like that in America, not even close. Okay? In fact, you got to go in debt. You got to go in $100,000 in debt just to be a teacher. Makes you think, well, heck, I should have been an engineer. Instead, I could have actually produced something, of value instead of being around all these sort of talentless people that don't know anything. They don't know anything, and they're just going to sit there and say, hey, do what I tell you. And so they're not actually educating. It's just about power and control, all for themselves and none for anybody else. They're not strengthening people. There's no solidarity. They're not educating people. There's nobody that talks about these ideas out here. So current account surplus larger than China's has as a share of GDP as a badge of pride for many Germans, but economists such as Simon Tilford of the Center for European Reform accuse them of fetishing exports. They got an export fetish. They just want to keep exporting stuff. Slow down, Germany. That's what everybody keeps telling them. Slow down. No. I think Germany, keep doing what you're doing, Germany. Germany, you got a social democracy and you're exporting. You are part of the European Union, which is exporting more than the United States and China combined. And those are the biggest countries that are exporting things. So the European Union is the biggest export. They have the biggest GDP. So France's finance minister, the head of the International Monetary Fund, questioned whether Germany's export-dependent model was sustainable. She spoke for many. So there's a great deal of admiration. Spain's education minister is looking into Germany's dual system of vocational training, which combines classroom instruction with work experience. Genius. That makes sense. Why are we educating these kids? Just so we can get a paycheck. We don't care if they get jobs. We don't care what happens to them. This is America. It's capitalistic. Ultra capitalism. Casino capitalism. So we got our money. We got our power. Now you get out the door and get on out of here. We don't give a crap what happens to you. We got our money. We manipulated you. We tricked you. We didn't build solidarity. We didn't educate you properly. You're not going to get a good job. Fuck you. And actually that sucks because in America, you got to be for the first 18 years, you have to go to school. And really, you'd be better off educating yourself and start working as young as possible and start making money. That would be the best thing possible. So Britain to have its own version of the German mental stand. Firms like Beckhoff, Nicolas Sarkozy began his campaign for re-election as France's president, surrounding his he would gladly swallow the model whole. Germany prioritized jobs. He said if it worked for them, why wouldn't it work for us? But is the model copiable? After a few days in East Westphalia, Lippy now marketing itself as the world as Al, you wonder. Well, there's something else. Okay, so I don't know what this article is titled. What Germany offers the world by The Economist. Other countries would love to import Germany's economic model, but its way of doing things is a lot less amenable to export than the wares it produces. The European Central Bank controls Europe's currency from Frankfurt, Germany's financial center. So that, I'm sure that helps when you got the European Central Bank right there where you're at. I think that probably would help. Where's the Federal Reserve? I feel like the Federal Reserve should be in Washington, D.C. Maybe it's in New York or something. It's not in Kentucky, so we don't have a central bank here. But they got the central bank in Europe in Frankfurt, Germany. Beckhoff Automation in a bucolic corner of Westphalia, which is where my family is from, the Gripshovers, controls the bank, or more precisely, its devices control the bank's lighting and ventilation. Other Beckhoff gizmos raise the curtain and dim the lights at Milan's Teatro alla Scala. Yet more are embedded in luxury sailboats and dancing fountains outside Las Vegas hotels and in half the wind turbines made in China. Omnipresent but obscure, family-owned but by no means puny, Beckhoff is among thousands of hidden champions that account for much of Germany's prowess as a manufacturer and exporter. Its sales leapt 34% to $608 million last year, and it's aiming for two. I don't know what that symbol even is. See, I don't even know what that symbol is. It's a euro. That's a euro, isn't it? That little L, that's a pound. You see that weird little L? That's a pound. Okay, so Beckhoff exports more than half its output, but its manufacturing is mainly in high-wage, rule-bound Germany. Largely thanks to its Beckhoffs, Germany looks like a bright exception to the dispiriting rule among developed economies. True, its economy contracted more than those of the rich countries during the 2008-9 world recession, but the jobless rate rose by less than all the others, peaking at 7.9%. So the jobless rate in Germany wasn't bad, and nobody talks about downgrading Germany's AAA credit rating. You can borrow money for practically nothing. Not all the news is good. The economy shrank in the first quarter of 2011, and even its first quarter figures do not reveal Germany itself to be in recession. Its economy will continue to suffer the drag of recession everywhere in the Eurozone and a slowdown in developing countries. But just 1% growth is enough to create jobs, according to Bert Rurup, a former chairman of the government's Council of Economic Wise Men. In a book written with the journalist Dirk Hielman, Fat Years, Why Germany Has a Brilliant Future, he giddily predicts that by 2030, Germany will become the world's the richest large country in terms of income per head. Per capita, Germany will be the richest country out here. Such success does not bring universal admiration. We already read this part. So, again, check out Germany's economic model. They are kicking ass. And this brings us to the article that actually started my fascination with Germany. Really comes from that my immigrants came from Germany, and now they're essentially setting an example for the rest of the world that they're going to do better. They're going to do better. The people that's running Kentucky, I don't think they don't care about anybody or anything, and so they're not actually doing good stuff here. We don't have instant runoff voting. We have 30% of a turnout rate, so we don't even have democracy. We're all corporate America, and we're just cheap labor for the corporations. So fuck off, get a goddamn wage slave job. Don't talk to your workers. Make sure you rat them out. You snitch on them if you see anything that's going on. Because if you don't do it, then you might get fired, and anybody is expendable. So anybody can be fired for any reason whatsoever because there's 20 other people that's applying for a job that needs to work. So the European Union, 27 members with 500 million people, is the largest, wealthiest trading bloc in the world, producing nearly a third of the world's economy. A third of the world's economy is coming out of Europe. European nations spend far less than the United States for universal health care. So they got universal health care, but we spend more money on it. They got universal health care. We just now got kind of universal health care, but it's really a sellout to the insurance companies. But they have universal health care, and it's cheaper. The World Health Organization is rated Germany's universal health care as being cheaper than the best in the world. So Germany's health care is the best. Even that U.S. health care is ranked 37th. We're not number one anymore. In health care, we're 37th. So because we don't have a social safety net, because we don't actually have a government that cares about our health, and our health is life. And if they don't care about our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what do they care about? So Europe is twice as energy efficient as the U.S. in their ecological footprint. The amount of Earth's capacity that a population consumes is about half of the United States for the same standard of living. So they're energy efficient, and they're not burning as much coal, and they're not damaging the earth as much, right? So their footprint is less. Unemployment in the U.S. is widespread. It's becoming chronic. But when Americans have jobs, we work longer hours than our peers in Europe. Before the recession, Americans were working 1,804 hours per year versus 1,436 hours for Germans, the equivalent of 9 extra 40 hours per year. In his new book, Were You Born in the Wrong Continent?, Thomas Geohagen makes a strong case that European social democracies, particularly Germany, have some lessons and models that might make life a lot more livable. Germans have 6 weeks of federally mandated vacation, free university tuition, and nursing care. So the elderly are being taken care of. Everybody's health is being taken care of. Health care from the government makes sense for everybody. Now we force the companies to produce health care. If the government did it, that would save the companies. If the government did it, then you would also be making healthy workers for the companies. So since both Democrats and Republicans care about the companies, universal health care doesn't hurt the companies, it helps them. It takes a burden of actually having to provide health care from them, and it's making their workers healthy. Healthier workers can produce more, work harder, work longer. So you heard the arguments for years about how these wussy Europeans can't compete in a global economy. You've heard it so many times you might believe it, but like so many things, the media repeats endlessly. It's just not true. Since 2003, it's not China but Germany, that colossus of European socialism, that has either led the world in export sales or at least been tied for first, even as we in the United States fall more deeply into the clutches of our foreign creditors, China foremost among them. Germany has somehow managed to create a high-wage, unionized economy without shipping all of its jobs abroad or creating a massive trade deficit, or any trade deficit at all. And even as the Germans outsell the United States, they manage to take 6 weeks of vacation every year. So they get vacation time, right? They get holidays and vacation, 6 weeks off, a month and a half. So Germany somehow managed to create a high-wage, unionized economy without shipping all its jobs abroad or creating a massive trade deficit or any trade deficit at all. Even as the Germans outsell the United States, they managed to take 6 weeks of vacation every year. They're beating us with one hand tied behind their back. Thomas G. Ogden, a graduate of Harvard and Harvard Law School, is a labor lawyer with Desprez, Schwartz, and Geohagen in Chicago. He's been a staff writer and a contributing writer to the New Republic, and his work has appeared in many other journals. Geohagen ran unsuccessfully in the Democratic congressional primary to succeed Rahm Emanuel, and is the author of 6 books, including Whose Side Are You On?, The Secret Lives of Citizens, and most recently, Were You Born on the Wrong Continent? So they talk about a personal experience as stopover in Zurich. So Thomas Geohagen, in 1993, it got in my head for reasons too long to tell, to go see a woman I met who happened to be in Moscow. Because of the coup in October 1993, all the flights to Moscow were canceled, and I ended up in Zurich. I had not been in Western Europe for years, and while I was waiting for clearance, I happened to walk around the streets, and I was just thunderstruck by how nice it was. Every bookstore seemed to be like a boutique, and even the train station was like a perfumery. And I thought, how did this part of the world get so wealthy without me knowing about it? And that was an epiphany that led me to take a bigger and bigger interest in how Europeans live, and ask ultimately, were you born on the wrong continent? In talking about that walk, you point out that if you don't have much poverty, life is better for everybody. Not just better for the poor, but for everybody. And that's absolutely true. You have more of the city available to you. My hometown, Chicago, is fantastic, but there's a huge swath of it you don't particularly want to go to. Not because of any criminal danger, but just because it's run down. Large, white ethnic neighborhoods on the northwest side are unattractive and dilapidated. There are huge parts of the city that are downright dangerous. And Europe isn't like that. It's the argument for social democracy, more equality, less poverty, and disorder. Again, helping the poor, helping the middle class, helps everybody. Rising tide lifts all boats. In the book, The Spirit Level, Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett point out that on average, everything is worse for everybody in the countries with the most unequal distribution of wealth. As a labor lawyer, I can see that janitors and truck drivers I represent would be better off in a social democracy. And I make the argument in the book that even people who are doing relatively well would be literally materially better off with a more egalitarian social democracy. Some of the public goods that are available there for free, universal education, for example, are skewed towards the people who are relatively at the top. Someone who doesn't go to university doesn't get that benefit, but a family who sends 2 or 3 kids gets an enormous benefit. Of course, low-income sectors do better too. Nevertheless, it could be said there's a growing amount of poverty in Germany, especially during the 1990s. Early part of the last decade, there was a scaling back of social democracy. For a while, the bubble of casino capitalism in the UK and US led to an allocation of capital in the US and UK looking for hot returns. Since the collapse of casino-type capitalism in 2008, money has shifted back where it should have been in the first place to the virtuous economies of the world like Germany, based in manufacturing. I recall Kevin Phillips pointing out in his book, Bad Money, that year after year, the U.S. shifted more and more of our money and our best and brightest young people into finance. When the casinos seemed to be paying off, our other countries also shifted in that direction. And when it broke, we didn't have the manufacturing export base like a country like Germany has to fall back on. The Germans had a certain amount of schadenfreude about the whole thing. They're basically very pessimistic people by temperament. And when they saw the world debacle they weren't responsible for, they become a little bit more upbeat. They had what they call a good recession. The German government was very quick off the mark, immediately put in place what they called a Kurzarbeit. Though the short week program, the government paid people to stay on the job they may otherwise have let go. We got ahead of the curve, one German minister said. Employment didn't drop here the way it did in the U.S. When the economy recovered, there was no incentive to hold off hiring because the people were already on the job. Their unemployment is now significantly lower than ours and the economy is booming. When asked why Obama didn't pursue a similar policy to stem in the economic bleeding, Larry Summers dismissed the idea, saying the White House wanted to create new jobs, not preserve old ones. And that's a lame answer. How come you don't want to stem the economic bleeding? Who cares? We want new jobs, not the old ones. We want a washing. We want a shock doctrine. You know, we're going to make America's economy scream. People are going to lose their jobs and it's going to be rough. But we want new jobs, not old ones. So it's a lame answer and it's an arrogant one. Good for you, Larry. What about the guy who lost his job and his family and his kids? Larry Summers is the villain of my book. He's the architect of deregulation and was doing a war dance in the late 1990s about how the U.S. model was triumphant all over. Now the shoe's on the other foot. What's the status of the crisis in Europe right now? The EU includes not only virtuous, productive economies like Germany, but also others not nearly so. Those less virtuous economies were the so-called New Europe that Donald Rumsfeld was touting. People in the countries were in trouble. Now economically we're the ones willing to go to Iraq. And there's a connection. There are the countries that were much more inclined to go the American route, going into debt heavily, including using housing speculation as the engine of the economy, opening their economies big time to global bank debt and finance. Goldman Sachs poured tons of money into Greece and other New York, London, and German banks poured money into Spain. None of the bubbles occurred in Germany and in the old Europe that Donald Rumsfeld wrote off. Part of Europe is in trouble to the extent, and only to the extent, that's involved in the American model. Those countries most resistant to the American model are doing fine. So the American model nearly blew up the world in 2008. The casino-style capitalism that helps the great big banks, right, and the huge wealthy sell all the assets, make them a ton of money, and screw everybody else, sort of like your Mitt Romneys. By the way, why is Goldman Sachs willing to lead money to weak economies like Greece? Greece was in the EU. Spain was in the EU. These countries would never have gotten all this money from U.S. banks. Why is it so important about the EU? At the end of the day, the Germans with their trade surplus are able to pay. And in fact, that's what happened. What is the relationship unfolding between Germany and the economies it's bailing out? It's working out pretty well. The Germans are doing even better because the euro fell and it was overvalued to begin with, and that made German goods more competitive. After the great debt crisis, the euro became relatively cheaper, and that made Germany more profitable as an export country. Greece didn't collapse partly because the Germans bailed it out and partly because there was belt tightening in Greece and plenty of tourists still coming in. By the way, Greece represents only 2% of the EU's total GDP, whereas California represents 14% of the U.S. Yet when California reached out to the federal government for similar help, it didn't get help. So Greece is only exporting 2%. They said, hey, European Union, we're sinking here. They saved them. California, on the other hand, is producing 14% of the GDP in the United States. And when they needed help, America said, screw you, California. We don't care about you. You see a story in the New York Times every 6 weeks, ever since I graduated from college in 1971, about how Europe is going to collapse. They come out like clockwork. Let's talk about some of the contrast in the book between our culture and theirs. People here work 9 more weeks per year. In the U.S., the most driven work 2,300 hours a year, and people a notch or two below the most driven are working 1,800 hours a year. That doesn't count hours that are off the clock. Why do we work so hard? You say one of the reasons is because we don't have unions or job security. People are afraid that if they don't work weekends and overtime, if they don't skip their kid's soccer game, they'll get laid off. Nobody knows who's going to be laid off next. It's all arbitrary. Chainsaw Al could knock down your cubicle door at any time. So everyone has an incentive to stay 5 minutes longer than everybody else, and that creates anarchy. According to labor economist Richard Freeman at Harvard and Linda Bell at Haverford, in the U.S., there's nobody to tell you to go home. So since everybody has the incentive to keep on working more hours and to get more paycheck, it's cutthroat casino capitalism. There's no solidarity here. Given the fact that we work more, are we productive? You know, we're putting in more hours, are we productive? And while when we work more hours, we produce more, are we more efficiently producing more? If you consider productivity as output per hour, working longer decreases worker productivity. My friend Isabel came to the United States to attend grad school in Northwestern and was upset when she discovered there's no holidays here. In the middle of the year, I found her very stressed, and I figured out what was happening. She was working American hours with German efficiency. When you look at the fact that Germans rank at the top of the world in terms of export sales, on par with the Chinese who work till they drop, you realize that they must be doing something that makes them more efficient. Leisure time also has material value. The fact that Americans work longer and longer hours increases GDP per capita, but it doesn't necessarily raise our standard of living. Americans don't know how things actually work in European countries. Totally true. In fact, if I said, hey, Germany is doing that, well, this ain't Germany. So I don't care what Germany does. Germany has naked cities where they have no laws for the motorists and pedestrians, and you actually have to look at each other in order to get by. You also don't have speedsters just flying through your town. People have to drive slow enough so they don't run over anybody, and while they're driving slow enough, they get to see what's going on and possibly spend money there. So I remember mentioning, hey, you know, there's naked cities, you know, all over the place, even in Haiti, right? Basically, the point is you don't hit anybody. That's the only law. Don't wreck into anybody. Here, rolling stop, you'll get fined, and that's how the state's making more money. More arrest, more police brutality, more bullshit, right? Even progressives in America don't look overseas for models that work. Even progressives, even the liberals, aren't even looking for other models of economic system. Casino capitalism is it. Dog eat dog world. Every man for himself. If you make it good, if you sink, no good. I find it almost pathological that our exceptionalism infects even those who assume they don't believe in it. I have a friend who's just come back from being a journalist for a long time in France and now works as a political reporter in Washington, D.C. She recently told me it's becoming impossible for me to stay in a carpool with other women journalists because all I do is say to them, oh, it's so much better in France. This is so much better. If this happened, we wouldn't. And they're just so sick of me. They don't want to hear any more about France. But it is way better in France. In some ways, it's understandable. In some ways, tragic. Another journalist friend of mine told me the 3 most deadly words in American journalism is, in Sweden, they. People just won't keep going from there. And why is that? These are the economies that have developed a level of sophistication and look like the U.S. in so many ways. People say Europe's becoming just like America, but it's not. They're social democracies. So they might be tightening their belt up and getting more into but they're still keeping the things that prop up working class. So they might be doing some things that America's doing, but they're also maintaining the social spending that is keeping people afloat. That, you know, so they're not falling off. Let's make a quick comparison of GDP. The problem with GDP is that it only has an addition side. It doesn't have a subtraction side. So an auto accident increases GDP. Crime increases GDP. Waste and fraud and gambling. Katrina increases GDP. Urban sprawl especially increases GDP. Hours stuck in traffic increases GDP. So increasing GDP doesn't solve poverty. It doesn't solve pollution. You know, there's lots of things that just making a bunch of crap doesn't actually help, right? So if I just make a bunch of stuff, how's that going to solve poverty? It doesn't. If I sell a bunch of stuff that's out of their cost, range, they get none of that. That doesn't help the poor. The pollution, if I pollute a whole bunch, who's that help? That helps nobody. But I'm producing more, so my GDP looks good. So basically, bad things, war, destruction, earthquakes, When things collapse, these are good for the economy, for the GDP. Puts people to work. You got to build stuff. You got to create stuff. The GDP is increasing. Waste, fraud, gambling. Katrina increases GDP, right? Auto accidents increase GDP. Urban sprawl increases GDP. Hours stuck in traffic. You're burning all that energy when you're, sitting in traffic. So we've monetized so many things that we used to do for ourselves or for our families. You're shelling out $50,000 in tuition for a New York University law school, and your counterpart in Europe is getting it for free. How pathetic for the poor European to add nothing to the GDP. And in America, we're increasing GDP, but dragging down people's standard of living. It's a very perverse system of accounting. You say it's all addition and no subtraction, but it's not even all addition. Nothing increases your well-being or your material standard of living as much as leisure time. Among the untouchables in India, of course, that's absolutely not the case. Leisure is a nightmare. Unemployment is a nightmare. But for many, a loss of leisure is a loss of material value. For example, leisure to go to a free concert at Millennium Park in Chicago. It's a glorious experience. People in Europe are gaga about it because it's the one thing in America that seems to them the most European. Wonderful orchestras, pop bands, jazz bands playing right in the middle of the city. Gorgeous lawns, people picnicking. And it's all free. Millennium Park in Chicago, it's a wonderful experience. It's so un-American. There's no money going out the door. It makes a mark on your life, but you can't turn it into a sum of dollars. So for America, that means nothing. It means nothing. Even though in the course, it actually means everything. You say that the three building blocks of Germany's social democracy are the workers' councils, the election of board of directors by the workers as well as by hedge fund managers, and the regional wage-setting institutions. First, work councils. The analogy I use in the book is fictitious. Imagine you elect a works council from among the employees at the Barnes & Noble bookstore where you work. They don't bargain for wages as done by the unions, but they have all sorts of rights that relate to working time, who gets laid off, even whether the store is going to close or not. They can go in and look at the books. The management has to enter into agreements. The works council can't dictate, but they have enormous influence over what working hours will be, who's going to work, and how. Code-determined boards are mandated at German companies with 2,000 employees or more, the global companies that are beating us, although you can have them in other situations. These are maybe more like super boards that don't do as much day-to-day managing as our boards of directors do. It consists one half of people elected by and from the workers and one half elected by the shareholders. The chairman of the board is selected by the shareholders and has a double vote, so that if there's a tie between the shareholders and the employees, the shareholders win. But it creates a lot of potential influence over how the debate goes. You say the shoe's on the other foot when it comes to choosing the CEO, correct? If the shareholders are divided on who should be the next CEO, the clerks get to pick the king. In contract negotiations over the past 10, 15, 20 years, American workers have been giving back things, agreeing to 2 tiers, lowering their pension guarantees. I've never heard of any of them trading a concession for the right to elect members to the board. The UAW had something on the board once. Management can't even say it won't work because Germany's beating our pants in manufacturing. The code-determined board is also spreading elsewhere, right? The German model has made inroads in the U.S. model in other European countries. You quote the German labor minister saying our biggest export now is co-determination. Now third, regional or sector wage setting. It's much reduced these days, but they still have some version of regional wage bargaining setting standards that everybody has to comply with. That used to be true here to a lesser extent than in Germany, but has disappeared. Are you talking about a situation where you would negotiate with one of the 3 big automakers and the others would basically get the same deal? I was thinking more of the United Mine Workers negotiating a contract with multiple employer associations to produce a national agreement that covered every employer. That was true in the coal industry and with the Teamsters in the trucking industry. Agreements across the whole industry create a sense of transparency. People know what their wages are. East Germany was a factor in the breakdown. You couldn't really have the same labor costs and labor standards that you had in West Germany because the economy wasn't at the same stage of development. If you compare your quality of life and the prospective quality of life for your children with the German quality of life, things are only getting worse. To cite just one example, economist Robert Frank talks about the fact that American families end up moving into neighborhoods they can't afford because that's where the schools are, and I'm sure this played some role in the mortgage collapse. We'd be much more competitive globally if Americans had 6 weeks off and had a chance to go and see what people are doing in other countries. We'd come back much more sophisticated about them and probably have better ideas about how to sell things to them. You point out as globalization grew, the U.S. chose to compete on the basis of cheap labor by outsourcing. We kept the marketing executives here and moved the manufacturing elsewhere. We've been playing that game for 20 to 30 years now. Germany chose to play the opposite game. 30 years later, the Germans are making money off of China, and China is making big-time money off of us. One thing I try to get really across in any book, many Americans think that we got a trade deficit because we can't compete with China. Not true. We got a trade deficit because we can't compete with Germany and selling things to China. Until people wake up and look at the kinds of things that the Germans are doing to keep their manufacturing base, we're going to run deficits which leave us in the clutches of foreign creditors and compromise our autonomy as a country. This is something that's right-wing should be up in the arms about. Absolutely, and they're clueless. They're mortgaging this country's future, and they're too stupid to realize it. The Democrats have to do something for their base. Keep it simple and make it universal. Unlike the health care bill, which was perceived as a handout for them, the uninsured, many of them in the red states. So the Republicans are sitting there shitting on their own people. The red states, Kentucky, it helped 500,000 people. And Mitch McConnell wants to lift it up root and branch. It helped 500,000 Kentuckians. 500,000 Kentuckians got health care that's never had health care in their lives. Old people, old women get to go to the doctor, get their prescription, and get their shit paid for. Democrats should focus on things that either give a direct benefit to the people or give them a sense of power. For example, increase Social Security so that it's a real public pension. Germany had public pensions. Otto von Bismarck was giving out public pensions. Otto von Bismarck had a land reform. Otto von Bismarck had health insurance, 1871. Germany's had universal health insurance since 1871. And we just now got it. We're number one. What are we number one in? Racism, police brutality, pollution, child abuse. Well, what are we number one in? Seriously, what are we number one in? I don't even know. Name something we're number one for. The greatest debt, trillions of debt, $14 trillion in debt. We're number one there. Of course, we can't do this overnight, but we can set it as a serious goal. Social Security in the U.S. is 39% of their income. So old people, they rely on Social Security for 40% of what it is that they have. In Germany, it's 67%, but it's dropped. It says, to the low 50s. But people have tons of money in the bank over there. There's a high savings rate, and at least in the unions, they also have private pensions that work much better than the U.S. They don't also graduate college with thousands of dollars in debt that many will carry for the rest of their lives. They do have a demographic crisis that they're going to have to get through, but they've protected the system. Raising Social Security to 50% of working income means that when you go on to Social Security, you'll get half of what you were getting when you were working. Currently, you get less than 2/5. The top 20 developed countries have an average rate of something like 60%, so we can do this. My second proposal is simply the most effective way to move ultimately to a single-payer healthcare system, which I think we have to do. I would say even if I didn't think single-payer were a better system, you have to have one consistent system of payment to get control of healthcare costs. All the European countries do this. It doesn't have to be a single payer, but it has to be a consistent system. You can't have a mix of private market and a single payer. No, but actually, I don't even know why couldn't you? Have the government compete, and they would trounce the insurance companies. You keep the competition there, and they would trounce it. As soon as the government got a health insurance, it'd be $5 for anybody that wanted it. Let's lower Medicare's eligibility to 55. What brought back General Motors and Chrysler? The government came in, took away their retiree health care costs. We got to lower labor costs not by bringing down wages. That would be a disaster. But by having the government assume labor costs that are making us less competitive. People of 55 to 65 will all vote for you because it will change their lives. Folks like Alan Simpson and Pete Peterson are going to say, wait a minute, you're going in exactly the wrong direction. Social Security basically is solvent now even at its current level. And I have ways for paying for it. First, if you brought back the estate tax and dedicated the proceeds to the Social Security Trust, as Robert Ball, former Social Security Commissioner, once proposed. Mitch McConnell killed the fucking estate tax. That only affects the fucking rich of the rich of the rich. That would fucking make Social Security solvent first, and then second, lift the cap on Social Security tax. Right now, on Social Security tax, it's at $90,000. So it applies to all incomes. Denmark, the happiest country in the world, has a 90% tax rate. After all, Social Security is for everyone. Third, if you did things like eliminate the corporate debt protection for debt that is used in leveraged buyouts and non-productive uses right now, you would generate the financial reserve that could pay for this. Finally, I do think people should pay a little more for their Social Security because they're going to get a better deal. All these things have two purposes: to do something directly beneficial to the base now, to do something that reduces the size and influence of the financial sector and increases the viability of manufacturing. Lower the ages for Medicare, for example, allows employers to substantially lower their labor costs for the most expensive workers. It's not just to make them competitive, but it's also to induce investment into manufacturing, which is right now inhibited by the uncertainty of healthcare costs. Ultimately, the goal of all this is to get the U.S. out of debt. The debt issue ought to be the Democrats' issue, not the Republicans. The real debt issue is our external trade deficit. We either have consumers go into debt to make the books balance at the end of the day, as we did during the Bush era. We have a federal government do it when the consumers cut back. We don't earn our way out of the world. Until we do, we're going to be running large consumer debts, which leads to private financial panics, or federal debt, which could lead to a sovereign default. We got to get out of that box, and the only way to do it is to put in measures that make our economy more competitive globally. Says you're saying Obama and the Democratic Party could transform the issue of debts and deficits by offering solutions that are not just about paying today's bill, but about restructuring our ability to pay the bill in the future. This is from alternate.org. I'm going to give credit to the man. I know it's at the very end who wrote it. So it's Guggenheim and McNally. Terrence McNally is the one who wrote this. We'll never get out of debt until we confront our inability to pay our way in the world. We can't pay our way in the world. We can't do it. We have no manufacturing base. We keep borrowing all this money. The financial sector keeps on fucking over the people. The bankers don't give a shit. They won't lose no matter what they do. The more they fuck over people, they cannot lose. So whether it's me, the taxpayer, paying off the federal deficit, or me, the consumer, paying off with my Visa card, it doesn't make a difference at the end of the day. The people are going to pay. And the Democrats have to present themselves as the party that has a plan to get the country out of debt. You can also recommend a usury cap on credit cards. You got to get returns down in the financial sectors and returns up in manufacturing sectors. That's the key. And proposing that will split the business community in this country in a very healthy way. The Democrats can be the party of the manufacturers, even if it's at the expense of Wall Street. For years, the Democrats have slipped the other way. People perceive that, and they're frustrated by that. The financial sector currently funds both parties. You got Citizens United. Financial sector gives them shit tons of money. Republicans get to be true to their convictions, while Democrats end up negotiating with themselves. Though they may have some progressive leanings, their funders pull them in the other direction. Even progressive Democrats don't have the sophistication of their counterparts on the left in France and Germany in terms of understanding how important it is to not run up a national debt. Here we march against Mexico and put up tariff walls. They don't do that in Europe. They're not that unsophisticated. Let me finish with a quote of yours that really struck me. Without an industrial base, democracy dies. We have no industry. Manufacturing is going away. It's all about the financial industry. And fuck the financial industry. And fuck the world. We should have put those bankers in jail. Motherfuckers fuck the world and they don't even go to jail. If I got a small business and my shit was to go bankrupt, nobody gives a shit. If my shit was to go bankrupt, who bails me out? But the big banks are too big to fail. So we bail them out. Geo Gagan, he says, my own favorite ending line would be, countries like Germany do both capitalism and socialism better than we do. We need to be capitalistic and socialistic. We need social democracy. Communism has failed. Fuck communism. Let's be anti-communistic. Let's have land reform. Let's do what Otto von Bismarck was doing. Without an industrial base, a democracy dies. Our democracy is already dead. 30% turnout rate? We don't have no democracy here. Where the fuck is the democracy? There's no democracy. There's no solidarity. It's all for the bigwigs. And they think laissez-faire capitalism, casino-style, Wild West capitalism is the way to do it. Yeehaw! Let's hurry up and just turn it all down, right? Let's get turned up so we can fucking crash the whole fucking thing. And when the whole thing crashes, they'll have enough capital in their reserves. They'll make sure they and their people are fucking safe. And fuck everybody else. It's time working class people united. We need working class people to join together. Germany has been doing this shit for a long ass time. We haven't even fucking started doing this shit. And we could stop the deficit and be a... The Democratic Party could be a party for freedom. Health insurance, free college, that increases your freedom. It doesn't decrease it. Give me a fucking break.